Hello, and welcome to Captain Johnny's YouTube channel. A little bit about me. I'm a part-time streamer on Twitch at the exact same username. Um, I have a profound passion for hockey. It's something I've grown up with my entire life. And I'm noticing that there's a lot of talk of hockey, and it seems like it's hard to find a balance with it outside of a couple channels. The hockey guy comes to mind for one. Um, but I figured it could be fun for me to kind of give my little spiel on various things that come up, daily news trades, things like that. Um, I figured the best thing to do would be to start with a video of my thoughts on 32 teams. So, my apologies. This is just kind of a rough draft. I've kind of got it set up. I've got a couple little tricks here, thanks to being a streamer, that I've got an OBS and things like that, which makes transitions a little bit fun. So what I wanted to do was go through and give, again, my thoughts, just a quick 20, 30 seconds on each team and where I feel they're at um, in the 2022 season. So it's February this time, so we're getting pretty close to most of the way through the season. And I figure we've got a pretty good snapshot of where things are going right now. So as you can see, we've got the NHL logo up first. So my thoughts on the league as a whole is pick a thing. I've heard it said by Steve Dangle before, and he's very much got a point here. Um, there's so much back and forth and things not making sense that they really need to come together and just pick a thing. Things like offsides. That's a huge point of contention for everybody, and it is for me as well. You see a lot of goals that are overturned by, fractions of a skate length. Across the line. That's not the point behind the rule. The idea behind any rule is to preserve the game or to protect the players. That's the end result. At no point does somebody having a millimeter of distance over the line before the puck create any form of reasonable advantage. Enough with them. We're all tired of them. I think they took a step in the right direction, but they just need to boil it down to it doesn't need to come down to 5, 6, 8 minute reviews for a goal in the middle of the season for no reason. That can make it a 5 minute overtime last 15 minutes quite easily, and that's frustrating as a fan. But I figure if that's my biggest argument right now for the league, they're probably doing pretty good. So the Anaheim Ducks, this year they're a team that I've watched quite a bit. I'm not a local to the team, but I watch the Pacific Division quite a bit. I feel like they're in the middle of a transition phase that doesn't look like it's entirely going poorly. I would think that just a couple smart moves and a pinch of luck, and they could see them right back into, contending for first, second, third in the Pacific. Especially on a year where it would be much stronger than it is currently. And being a longtime Calgary Flames fan, I can tell you right now, the fact that I've got anything nice to say about the Ducks is pretty astounding. Ooh, screwing everything up here. There we go. The Arizona Coyotes. So here's my point of contention with the Arizona Coyotes. They are a team that hemorrhages money. I have found that over the last few years, they have found a way to be a little bit more interesting to watch. But at the end of the day, this whole "are we going to be here at the end of the season" thing is dragging on, and it's getting a little frustrating to watch. I would hate to see them exit the league. That's not what I would want for that, because it's a team I've grown up watching as well. But they got to get something figured out and something substantial. The Boston Bruins. So this is a team that I find that it's a bittersweet thing for me where I some years I love to watch them, some years I absolutely hate it. And a lot of it does boil down to the roster and what's going on with it. On the years when Brad Marchand is acting up and doing what he does, it can make it a little tough to be like, yeah, I like watching the Bruins. Um, but at the end of the day, I do find that they are fairly regularly competitive, and their are generally pretty interesting to watch. So, um, and those jerseys, there's just something about them that I just absolutely love. The simplicity in the colors, pretty nice. The Buffalo Sabres, I think this is going to be something that everybody says pretty resoundingly. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. Um, the team has not been any measurable amount of competitive in a long time. It's getting to the point where I just if I see that a Sabres game is on, pass. I'll go do something else. I would like to see them get competitive. They have some young guys that are starting to come up and starting to form a core. But as it stands, again, you're 10, 11 years out from the last time you've made the playoffs. You got to figure something out here. Calgary Flames. So currently, right now, they're at the time of this recording, are sitting on a 10-game win streak. Now that is fantastic. It's made it very exciting to watch them. You've got Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk and Elias Lindholm that are just so much fun to watch, and they're showing how good they can actually be. They are currently first in the Pacific. However, that's only slightly undercut that at this point. In the standings, the Pacific, being first in the Pacific with 66 points, would only get you the first wild card spot in the East. So there's a lot of points coming out of the West and kind of making that seem a little bit better than it is. But I do hope they carry on with what they're going through with, because what they're doing is working, and I hope that they can, make the playoffs and make a substantial run, not just come in and make a first round exit, which they are very prone to doing. Carolina Hurricanes. So these guys are a ton of fun to watch. The storm surge, I remember that was a point of contention when it first happened. I think it's something that's fun as long as it stays to the players. When they start to add additional production value thanks to the management team, it kind of seems to take away from it. But these guys are good. They're a threat to everybody, and it looks like it could stay that way for the foreseeable future. So, I mean, Carolina fans, get comfy. You're going to be watching a lot of postseason if they keep this up. The Chicago Blackhawks. This one kind of stings a little bit because I am a fan of Jonathan Toews. I'm not a fan of his $10.5 million contract that's just not being lived up to. But I digress. I've pointed out that him and Patrick Kane had 3 Stanley Cups that they had brought to the franchise at the time they had signed those contracts. So some of that money is coming back from the success they had garnered the team. That being said, it seems like right now they're just kind of spinning their wheels year after year. They get a little bit of traction, they fall back. They get a little traction, they fall back. I really hope that this season's just an indication of getting a core built again, because with Jones in, Fleury's in, Crawford's out, Duncan Keith is now out, who was a substantial part of that core. So that transition, hopefully this is just an awkward year and they can kind of start catching traction again and being that team that everybody dreaded having to play through the early 2010s, when they were just a force to be reckoned with. Colorado Avalanche. Speaking of forces of nature and forces to be reckoned with, everything's firing on all cylinders. They've shown that even with an injury here or there to the core, they can still remain very, very, very deadly to anybody. Nazem Kadri's having an absolute career season there. And with Rantanen, and you've got McKinnon and Landeskog, they're just so high end loaded that I would be shocked if this core doesn't win a Stanley Cup outside the next 2 or 3 years. It would be absolutely, I'd be beside myself. Columbus Blue Jackets. So this is a team that I kind of get mixed feelings about. When they kind of built up to go onto that playoff run a couple of years ago, right before Bobrovsky and Panarin had made an exit, Duchesne made an exit. I really thought that that was a core that if they could have found a way to keep everything together, we'd be talking about these guys being regulars in the semifinals or the conference finals, because they were showing that they were getting those pieces together. Um, but as it stands right now, to say that they're a contender would be quite a stretch. A playoff team I could see reasonably, a couple tweaks here and there, and they would be on a system that I feel like would benefit them, and they would start seeing results pretty quickly. Dallas Stars. These guys, my biggest point of contention is their scoring. They have had a systemic scoring issue for a long time now, and it doesn't seem like anything they do seems to resolve it. I understand that defensive hockey will win you a lot of games, and it can take you a long way. But at the end of the day, if you can't score a goal, you can't win the game. And when the team decides they do want to put on a show, they get 5 or 6 goals. Well, they're not doing any help to the back end, so the goalies kind of get left out, hung out to dry. I hope they get that resolved. I do have a lot of fond memories watching the Dallas Stars as a kid, and I hope they can get back to that, especially on this new branding, because it is fantastic. The Detroit Red Wings, far fall from grace from when I was a kid and a teenager. Basically, once you started having guys like Datsuk and Zetterberg and Lidstrom making their exits, and that natural turnover, and actually being contended with the cap, the Detroit Red Wings have not really rebounded well from that. Um, they're starting to show that their drafting and development is catching up, but I would think it's at least a couple more years before they would be a regular playoff team again. Part of that problem is um, Detroit's farm team was never tested for a long time. They just load up on guys to the nuts, and they could let all of their rookies sit in the minors for 3, 4, 5 years and develop without having to be rushed. And then by the time they were NHLers, they were bang on. They knew the drill. They don't have that luxury anymore, and it started to show the last 4 years now. The Edmonton Oilers. So as a Calgary fan, the Oilers are a bit of a bittersweet thing for me. They are a ton of fun to watch, especially when McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman are firing on all cylinders. You get Darnell Nurse in there doing his scrappy thing. They do make their games very interesting. This same note, before this recent stretch of success they've had, it's been very streaky, and it was very frustrating to watch, because you know what's gone into getting this roster to where it's at. You go back to Nugent Hopkins and Taylor Hall, Yakupov, McDavid, all these first picks, that it just didn't seem to make a difference. It seems like they're catching traction. I would be surprised if they don't make the playoffs this year, but they would have to start doing something substantial, because you can see it starting to wear on McDavid not having any measurable postseason success. The Florida Panthers. So you want to talk about an absolute monster of a team right now. They have the highest differential in the league, and I don't think it's overly close right now. Whatever just finally clicked together with that roster, take it as far as it'll go. Even with the exit of Joel Quenneville earlier this year, that doesn't really seem to have affected them a whole lot, and it's because they're riding on their hard work. There's a lot of hard working players on that roster, so it's not a shock that the team is as successful as it is. It's how quickly they have shown it all of a sudden. I really hope that they make a deep run this year. And little shout out to Sam Bennett. I'm so glad he's found success over there that just didn't seem to register here in Calgary. I always knew he was a better player than he was able to do, or that he was given credit for. The LA Kings. So here's a team that seems like they're in an awkward spot where they're not sure where they're at. Are they still a team that is playoff bound, or do they need to reel back the team a little bit and maybe restructure to make a long-term playoff run? That core is aging, and it is really starting to show now. Luckily, their development seems to be keeping up with that, and it's just getting these guys moved over and getting them back to the contender status that they're not that far off from having been at this point. Their last cup was 2014, I want to say. Sounds right. So they're a bit of a ways out. The core that brought them there is getting close to the way out. But I don't think they have a whole lot to worry about. I think that the fans just need to be a little bit patient over the next year or two, and then you could easily see these guys running first, second in the Pacific with relative ease. But that's my thought on that. The Minnesota Wild. First and foremost, that logo. I absolutely love this logo. It's my favorite one in sports, period, and it's not even close. That being said, you want to talk about another team that's showing a turnaround. These guys, the Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello, are making all the difference in there. Matt Boldy, I think his name is. It's one of their rookies this year. He had quite the showing the other night. That really showed that they've got prospects that are ready to help keep things moving. I would think that as long as they stick to their system, I don't see why these guys won't be a lot of fun to watch for a long time. Montreal Canadiens. So an unfortunate exit from the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, right at the final. Without going too far into it, it's a video for another time. The Stanley Cup final against the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think it was a very unfair situation. For my money, it's enough that it qualifies a mention in any conversation about that final. But losing 4-1 in a team that was so overloaded with firepower, that was the hardest working team in the playoffs, and it was not close. It's unfortunate that they've had the fall off they've had this year. I didn't really think that was going to be the case, but these are the things that can happen from one year to the next. You can have a team that will go to the Stanley Cup final, and then all of a sudden it just not much changes. It was a Cinderella run, and that's all it was going to be. So this is a team that's on the cusp of rebuilding, and I'm pretty sure that they know that that's going to be inevitable at this point. Nashville Predators. I don't know what's changed with these guys. Part of it is owed to the fact that the Central, more often than not, is a very tight race. It's not always, your top division as far as like the points race itself, but it's always tight. So sometimes a team can go from second to fifth in a matter of a week outside of their control just because of the point spread. I don't think these guys have a whole lot to worry about because the defensive core that team has, with the goaltending from UC Saros, a hiccup maybe, but I wouldn't think that this is anything that you'd need to worry about. Definitely one of those teams that don't write them off until all 60 minutes are played, because they'll make you pay for that. New Jersey Devils. So this is going back to the same conversation we have about the Buffalo Sabres. Again, this is a team that, although has had more success than the Sabres have over the last 10 years and over the last few years, something's not working and something significant needs to happen. The results that they're getting for what that roster looks like on paper, just isn't adding up. Now they are in the Metro. The Metro very consistently is one of the hardest divisions to play in. Um, when you've got powerhouses like the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals that you're visiting 5, 6, 7 times a year, those are going to add up real quick. But there's a point when you can't let that be the narrative anymore. You have to do something about it and get back into the playoffs and be back in contention. First and foremost is they need to, I would say, goaltending. Mackenzie Blackwood is a very, very good goaltender, but there's just something missing, and I don't think he's an indefinite starter. A fringe starter or a 1A, 1B that takes the smaller portion of starts, maybe. But I think as your full-time starter, I think that might be asking a bit much at this point from what we've seen. New York Islanders. I can't honestly say what's going on there. They're a team that I think is hovering around the playoff line. I don't know if they're out of shot. I haven't checked the Metro standings in a little while. But this is a team that has struggled unbelievably this year. And for my money, I can't see where or why it's happened, given the season that they had last year. They were a very strong and very hardworking team. I don't know if it's bad luck at this point or if it's just the hard work isn't there or it's not the same. But if they don't get that under wraps, this could create a roster unravel that you don't want. You don't want to be looking at a rebuild in a few years with a roster that's perfectly fine and doesn't need to be broken down just based on your standings as a stat. So hopefully they make the rebound. But I don't have an explanation for that. New York Rangers, Mika Zibanejad. I have to say, huge fan of Mika Zibanejad. They are noticing the loss of Henrik Lundqvist at this point. Igor Shesterkin definitely looks like he is able to take the reins. My fear is that when you come in off the laurels of a franchise type goaltender like Henrik Lundqvist, the expectation could get set higher than it should be. But the bottom line is if he's keeping you stable, then that's a win for any goaltender. I don't see him being the goaltender that's going to steal you enough points that will be the difference between making or breaking the playoffs. But come playoff time, I don't see why he wouldn't be the goaltender that snags you a series at least. But that's a team that's they've got a bright future over the next few years, as far as I'm concerned. But one man's opinion, right? Ottawa Senators is probably the third mention of okay, enough's enough. You're looking at a team that was unbelievably competitive, and it is very regularly pointed out that as recently as 2017, one goal away from the Stanley Cup final. As far as I'm concerned, based on the way that series went, and looking at the roster at that point, I think if Ottawa had been the one to go to the final in the East, it would have been a completely reasonable expectation for them to win the cup at that point. That was a team that had earned their spot, and then it's just been kind of one dumpster fire after another. With the leadership of Brady Tkachuk being your point man on that team, it's made a noticeable difference. Drake Batherson having the success that he's had for the team has obviously a huge help. I think that's a team that could use a little bit more stable goaltending, and then it wouldn't be unreasonable for them to start being within shot of the playoffs and not so close to the bottom of the standings so regularly. That's a team that does work hard. There is a reasonable amount of talent, but they're still quite a ways off from being a contender. The Philadelphia Flyers, they have kind of really, really unraveled the core that kept them surprisingly competitive. I know there was a couple years there, like when you still had Jake Voracek and Wayne Simmons, where you're like, okay, well, Philadelphia's missing the playoffs. Then they'd go on this run right near the end, and then you're like, oh crap, right? They're actually a really good team. So that was them competing with the standings more so. At this point now, it looks like this roster is due for at the very least a retool. I do still find them fun to watch when I can catch their games. You know, I'm blanking on his name. Sean Couturier. Sorry, Sean Couturier. I think is a good staple to start retooling around. Given that he's a veteran presence, but he's not so close to the end of his career that you couldn't form a core that would move forward after he moves on. Saying that, I understand he's not that much younger than Claude Giroux, but that being said, a retool is necessary. Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't get it. I don't understand how the Pittsburgh Penguins can have such control of the top three spots of the Metro. It seems like at will, even when they're struggling, or when it appears that they're struggling in the standings, they're still playing really, really excellent hockey. It's they're a team that obviously you can't get 110% out of them every night and walk out with 55 wins every season. But a team that stayed as competitive as they have for as long as they have, with their prospect pool still looking as good as it does. It's almost like they're playing this with cheat codes on. It just doesn't seem like anything's going to upend them at this point. And short of Crosby and Gino retiring, I honestly don't think that will have as big of an impact as two franchise players retiring normally would. You'll notice they're not there, but I don't think they'll suffer in the standings too much, just based on what they have to rebuild with. San Jose Sharks. So this is a team that, as well as recently as 2017, you're looking at the Stanley Cup final when they lost to Pittsburgh, and then it's just seemed to decline and decline and decline. I as much as I loved watching Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau just giving everything they can for that team, I'm glad that those roster spots are open to start getting some new blood in there. I understand that losing Evander Kane is very bittersweet to most people. He is the kind of personality that can really tank your locker room really quickly. The personal stuff that's been all over the place with him in recent history. But you've still had a 30 goal scoring power forward, a very effective one. So I hope they find somebody to replace that role sooner rather than later, and maybe they can get back into creating higher competition at the top end of the Pacific Division soon again. Because this is not the San Jose Sharks that we're used to. But they are in that ebb and flow period where you got to kind of just take it with a grain of salt and don't think of it as a nuke it situation before you have to. Seattle Kraken. So this is an unfortunate story with the standings. Right from minute one, looking at the roster they had selected out of the expansion draft, they were not going to be the Vegas Golden Knights round 2 type thing. That roster was not built that way. Their Stanley Cup goal, I'm thinking, is closer to 7 to 10 years. They're not nearly as ambitious with that. But the fact that they've struggled as much as they have, knowing that, again, the guys that are on that roster, like no different than I'm blanking on it now. They're a hardworking team. The Florida Panthers, the same thing. Like it's a roster full of hardworking players. They're not the most talented guys, but they are hardworking. So the fact that they're struggling this much, it kind of a surprise to me. Understanding that Captain Mark Giordano is on the tail end of he's maybe got a year or two more, and then he'll probably call it a career. But even he's struggling more than I expected to at this point, given that he is a recent Norris Trophy winner. And coming out of Calgary, he still seemed like he was on a swing where fine wine, where he was just getting better with age. But we'll see. It's first season. You kind of get a pass on it. But I am glad that they're showing they're trying. It's not going to be their season this year. St. Louis Blues. So 2019 Stanley Cup champions, and then kind of like the San Jose Sharks, they seem like they've come back down to earth. There's a lot of players that aren't on that roster and in that core anymore that were a big difference maker. Obviously losing Alex Pietrangelo to the Vegas Golden Knights, that's going to hurt anybody's blue line. A very effective quarterback on the power play, and 6'3" and 210 or whatever I think he is. Not a small body, and that's a hard role to replace. But hopefully this is just kind of a shake it off kind of year. I think leaning on Binnington at this point, it's going to be a high risk, high reward. He'll either rebound back to the Jordan Binnington that basically dragged that team into a position where they were contending for the Stanley Cup, or they'll keep riding him as a main goaltender when maybe he should be the fringe starter, and you find somebody a little bit more reliable to be your legitimate starter. But we'll see how they go there. I don't think they have anything to panic about yet. But if they don't get it under control, they could very soon. Tampa Bay Lightning. I've never had this with a team before, so being a Calgary fan, I get horrible flashbacks to 2004. Bottom line is, if you ever ask me, I don't care. The rule is, if it doesn't get challenged before play starts, oh well, that sucks. There was no challenge. Doesn't matter if it crossed the line or not. Calgary had a whole nother game to try and win the cup, and they didn't show up for that. So at this point, it's the past. It's whatever. You're coming up nearly 20 years ago that happened. But these guys, they have been so competitive for so long. I feel like I could do a video on a few aspects about the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it's kind of like that it was that effect of that late, like the 2017 era Penguins, where it's like, okay, you've been so good for so long, I would like to see somebody else. But I mean, at the end of the day, what they got, it's working. I don't think it has the longevity that the Pittsburgh Penguins does, but I do still see them being a force to be reckoned with for at least a couple more years. And if they can, kill it. If you have an embarrassment of riches, enjoy every minute of it, because it can change at any time. Toronto Maple Leafs. So for my money, I've got nothing really bad to say about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I do understand where fans of the team can get very frustrated, especially understanding that you've got like 30-something million tied up in 3 guys, or pretty close to that. No, over 30 million in 3 guys. And then Willie Nylander, who's on actually a pretty reasonable contract after he rebounded from that bad year. Their goaltending looks good. Their defensive core is a lot better than people give them credit for. I think that's just because it's Toronto and it's all eyes on Toronto, scrutinize everything. I do think that although it would be against Kyle Dubas's plan, I don't think it would hurt to maybe take one of your really high-end forward assets and see if you can get other assets. Maybe bolster your bottom 6, or bolster your defensive core. But I think the amount of upfront firepower with nothing else to support it, I think is what's keeping them from having the success that they're expecting from that team. But we'll see. They're a lot of fun to watch. I do love watching Toronto Maple Leafs highlights. I just don't like how many I have to watch. But that's part of watching hockey in Canada. Vancouver Canucks. Um, this is another team that I do believe should be better than what they are right now. They have a very exciting and very young core, but they have enough veteran presence that should be able to keep them calm enough that they should have a little bit more stability with their wins and not being so streaky. The one thing is when they get on a tear, wow, are they fun to watch? I can't say that enough. And again, as a Calgary fan, having something that profound and nice to say about the Vancouver Canucks says something, because that's a team that I was raised to hate. But at the end of the day, a fun team is a fun team to watch. Hopefully they can get that wrangled up and maybe start catching some traction here in the next year or two, maybe, and then be a contender again. That would be nice to see from them. Vegas Golden Knights. Not a team that has seen a whole lot of strife in the time that they've been around, bearing in mind that you're on year 5 now. Adding Jack Eichel as a shock to nobody. There's no way that doesn't bolster your forward lineup, and vastly improve that quickly. I would say, you know what, watch for them to go on a deep run, and I would imagine come the Western Final, it wouldn't shock me at all to see these guys in Colorado duke it out, and then whoever comes out of the East going, yikes, I don't want either team to win at this point. But a team that I've enjoyed since day one. I got right in on that as soon as they came in, and they really haven't ever disappointed me as a fan of the team that I can think of. So, yeah. Washington Capitals. This is another Tampa type effect. I do enjoy the team very much. I am kind of a little bit. I've grown weary of like Capitals. But I mean, Ovi is still one of the most effective goal scorers in the league, and he's approaching his mid-30s. In his mid-30s, something like that. And he doesn't show any signs of having slowed down any significant amount. Everybody's point of focus right now is, will he break Gretzky's goals record? For my money, I would think he does before he hangs up the skates. If he doesn't, that would be an active choice he makes, going, I'll go play in the KHL. I got close. I'm not that concerned about doing it. But a fun team. They've got a core that this will last. I don't see the Washington Capitals not being competitive anytime soon, especially because you've got a core that you've got any number of guys you could rebuild around if you needed to. The fact that they don't have Holtby anymore kind of surprises me, but I get it. I think they should have held on to him personally, but I'm not the management, right? Winnipeg Jets. So this is a team that it's a hardworking team. I find that they kind of have the same effect as Dallas for me, where it being streaky is a bit problematic, but I don't think they have a whole lot to worry about. They're showing that they're having a bit of a struggle this season. But I mean, I could see them making at least the second round of the playoffs. I struggle to see them going further than that, but I wouldn't be that surprised if they did. A team that, although can be frustrating to watch, especially because, again, they have this nasty habit of beating up Calgary when they meet up. But that hasn't taken away from the fact that I legitimately enjoy the team, and I think the branding's been absolutely on point for the last 10 years, and I hope they don't change it anytime soon, personally. But I don't know. It feels like there's something amiss. Like there's something when you watch them play that something seems amiss, like an locker room aura type thing. I don't know. But hopefully they get everything smoothed out. They can catch the traction that you would expect that roster to catch, and don't squander the talent that is Connor Hellebuck in net. Don't let that go to waste, because he'll take you a long way. And if any goaltender's going to get them a cup, it would be him. So, yeah, I think that's about it. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on all the teams in the NHL. Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Obviously, I'm no professional. I don't have any insights. This is just one person who enjoys watching hockey and just wanted to give a few 2 cents. And yeah, we'll see how things go. I expect to put up at least one full-length video a week. I'll be utilizing things like the YouTube Shorts for shorter just muses and news of the day. And yeah, let's see if we can have some fun with it. Probably in a couple months after I've figured out kind of my swing, maybe I'll start getting some video game content going, Let's Plays, things like that. But we'll see how that goes. So thank you to anybody who comes in and checks out the video. Anybody who drops a subscribe is hugely appreciated. If you'd like to get in contact with me, right in here you see Captain Johnny on Twitter. I answer everything there, and you can see my little musings throughout the day. And yeah, until then, thank you for coming by, and we'll catch you on the next one.